Invader Zim is the beloved and cult classic early 2000s Nickelodeon cartoon straight from the mind of Jonan Vasquez. While it was not extremely popular at the time, it has since developed a pretty wide following that remained active many years after the show's cancellation. With the 2019 resurgence with the movies and comics, many more eyes were drawn to the fandom, and even some years now after the comics have ended, the show still has many fans. I personally never watched the show when it was aired, I was much too young, but I did discover the show in my teenage years, and I've watched it through many times. I also watched the movie when it came out, and I own several of the comics. I consider myself a pretty big fan of this property, but this video is only going to be about the original show. I will not be talking about the movies or comics, but I do have thoughts on the movie that may end up in a video by itself one day, but at least for now, I'm leaving that off the table. I have a lot of problems with the movie, but I feel like it's not really appropriate to talk about it in a video just about the original series, and similarly the comics. I, have some of them, but I don't own all of them, so I don't really feel like talking about those either. So, again, this video just about the original show. So today we're going to be ranking every episode of Invader Zim, all 46 regular segments, as well as the pilot for a total of 47. But before we get into that, I do want to address the 15 unreleased episodes that are known to exist. Of them, 6 have no known transcript and 9 do. I think it's unfair to rank any of them against fully completed episodes, as there are a bunch of changes that can happen between the scripting and the final project, and it's hard to say how certain jokes in text would have come across as animated segments. And again, 6 of them don't even have that. So I will be ranking each of those in 2 separate groups. First, I'll be ranking the 6th with no script, based just on the concepts that we know about. Essentially, if I was a Nickelodeon executive and I was brought these just basic concepts, which one would I prefer to have, made? And then I will rank the 9 transcripts that we have that I just read on the wiki, just kind of reading them through, which ones I think sound the best, and I would have, again, chosen to greenlight if I was a Nick executive making that choice at the time. So we're going to be doing those 6, and then those 9, and then we'll begin the proper ranking. So for the ones that we just have the concepts of, at the bottom in 6th place is the episode just called Those, which I guess was going to be a parody of the movie Them in some form, where Zim had control over slightly larger than normal ants. There's just so little about this episode's concept that, of course, it's going to be at the bottom. In 5th place is going to be When Pants Ruled, an episode that was originally put on hold for being too similar to that one episode of Jimmy Neutron where there were those living pants. And I don't know, just reading based off of the story ideas they had, I just am not interested in this episode. And then in 4th place is Gur's Big Day. I think it's kind of an interesting idea, and I don't remember if I owned the comic for that one. I know it became a comic, but I don't know. The basic story sounds okay, but not quite as good as the Gur episodes that we actually ended up getting in the show. In 3rd place is It Feeds on Noodles. The idea of Zim being a vampire that craves Chinese food instead of blood is it's just so great. It's the type of absurdity that this show is known for that I would have loved to see play out. In 2nd place is Top of the Line. I would have liked to see Tak-10 and Scooge having a bit more time in the limelight. And, better exploration of the Urgan race is always welcome. And in 1st place is Squishy Hugger of Worlds. The concept of this giant friendly creature that destroys planets by hugging them when it's just trying to be friendly is it's just so amazing. I love it. And I love the concept art I saw of Squishy. I really wish this episode could have gotten made. Now for the 9 transcripts that we have. At the bottom is Simon Says Doom. It has a couple of decent jokes, but overall, I just kind of found myself bored while reading through this script. I didn't find it very engaging. It felt pretty weak. In 8th place is Robo Parents Gone Wild. I think that they never needed a starring episode, There was Parent-Teacher Night, but they didn't feel like they were taking over the show there, more that they were just there to add humor, and I actually liked that episode, but Robo Parents Gone Wild didn't really seem that interesting to me. And in 7th is Mopiness of Doom. I think it's probably the worst of the unfinished episodes in terms of characterization. I just do not believe that Zim would do that if Dib decided to quit. I just don't. It just felt like bad fan fiction, and I can appreciate that sometimes, but not in this one, so I just didn't like that. But the I'm a Scientist gag that Membrane does, that is peak humor. In 6th place, we have The Return of Keith, an episode which is mostly fine, but I just am not really invested in the plot. It's just not super interesting to me, but I do think it's funny that Zim and Dib have to hug each other to kill Keith in the end, even though he, of course, gets resurrected because Nickelodeon won't let characters die, but oh well. In 5th place is Nubs of Doom. It's it's a fine enough episode and a good enough introduction to Minnie Moose, and I appreciate that Zim cares about Gur's feelings. But, I don't know, it didn't really feel super standout, kind of felt middle of the pack, hence its placement in 5th here. And, in 4th place is Day of the Spookies. I would have been happy to see Scooge in a, more major role, but the ending in the transcript kind of felt a bit lame, a bit rushed, and, I don't know, maybe it would have worked better if it was animated. 3rd place goes to 10 Minutes to Doom. I think it was a really cool idea, and the live timer that would have been in the corner would have been a nice way to make it more unique. And a Gaz/Zim team-up would have been really interesting. I'll discuss that kind of thing more in the pilot segment, but yeah, I think it would have been a cool idea. Shame that we never got to see it. In 2nd place is Invader Punchi. I love the idea that this little punk that's in their class almost conquers the world because Zim accidentally gives him the real Doomsday weapon that he was developing and not the replica that he thought he used. That's classic Zim. And in 1st, obviously, is The Trial, an episode where we get to see Zim's backstory in full. Oh, if only we got to see it. If only. I think it would have been near the top of the list if it had been made in reality, but, you know, it is what it is. The Trial never got to see the light of day, but if only it had. So, with all of that out of the way, and nearly 7 minutes into the video, let's finally begin with the actual list, starting at the very worst of them all, and ending with the best of the best. So, let's get started. So, what is the very worst episode of Invader Zim? Well, I looked into many fan discussions of this topic, and I found no true consensus. A lot of people said it was Mortoast or Soul Stealer, but I saw plenty of defenses of this episode, and it wasn't enough to make me think the majority of the fandom considered it the worst. I saw some people say Lice because they didn't like how disgusting it was. Some people said that Dib was too out of character and Gaz tasted a pork. Some people said Zim eats waffles, and I saw plenty of other sort of one-off ones as well. Everyone seems to have different opinions, a sign that I think speaks to the show's overall pretty good quality. That said, I personally have a very clear standout worst episode, and the bottom 3 episodes on this list are the only ones I consider to be pretty bad and have nothing really that's good or redeeming about them. Everything above these 3 duds is at least okay. And for me, out of these 3 terrible ones, the very worst episode was Bad Rubber Piggy. Look, I don't mind Dib or Zim getting roughed up occasionally, but the show usually treats it pretty cartoonishly, and I enjoy some cartoon violence, don't we all? And I don't mind real violence either, but there's a time and a place for it. Like, if I'm watching something like Breaking Bad and I see someone get beat up, I'm gonna expect it to be realistic and gritty because that's the type of show it is. And if I'm watching an episode like SpongeBob, I expect it to be cartoonish and silly because that's what the show is about. And, I just don't like how this is treated so realistically. Zim using the piggies to replace things in Dib's past that realistically cripple him, and then watching him literally die before his dad resurrects him, which, side note, why did he make his son into a mecha? Like, I don't know, Membrane is just crazy, I get it. But, I don't know, I just didn't like how realistically it treated Dib's injuries. It just felt too serious, too real, and in a way that I didn't like. Like, Dib's not even my favorite character, but I think even if you don't like Dib that much, watching a child get crippled like this was just too much for the show. How do people call Dark Harvest the darkest episode when this thing exists? This is like the only episode of Invader Zim that I never want to watch again. I do not like this episode. There are 2 episodes of Invader Zim that feel almost entirely non-canon, and this one here in the second to last bottom slot is one of those. The most horrible Xmas ever. What a bizarre episode. We just suddenly have Minnie Moose in the episode because the team wasn't allowed to finish Nubs of Doom to properly introduce him. And also, the sky is blue. You wouldn't think that sounds weird, but the sky is never blue in any other episode, so why is it suddenly here? It's just extremely inconsistent. I mean, given the framing device is this weird 2 million years in the future story being told by a robotic snowman, maybe it's meant to be inconsistent because, like, details got lost over the years. But also, why does this framing device even exist? Most people debate whether the future segments even are actually canon, and, I think that's a sign that the episode is pretty weak. Also, why does the giant Santa suit turn evil? Like, when Zim was getting overwhelmed by it, it acted nice, like the real Santa would. Why, when it became its own entity, did it suddenly become evil? I don't know, man. Who knows? Who cares? This is just such a disappointing final episode, and it was the last episode to be made, and it really sent the series out on a whimper instead of a bang. Balonius Maximus is just such a weird episode. It starts out with Zim being horribly allergic to bologna, which is a consistent joke from the pilot, and, that's cool. But how does he decide to get revenge on Dib? Well, he uses a tack to turn Dib into a giant bologna by somehow injecting bologna into his DNA, which makes him turn into bologna, I guess? Zim, if you have that kind of technology, why didn't you use it at any other point in the series? Like, seriously, that shit's impressive. Well, either way, Dib tricks Zim into using it back on him, and so now they're both turning into bologna, and the episode ends with them both as giant things of bologna. I'd be tempted to call this one not canon, but they clearly reference it in a later episode, so it must be canon, even though it makes no sense how they escaped from that, given that they no longer had the ability to work on the cure, so seriously, how did that happen? It's like, in episodes where the city gets destroyed like The Wetting or Hamstergeddon, I'm willing to believe that things got fixed before the next episode, but this one, it's hard to see the line at how they got fixed. Also, Div asks his sister to taste him in this episode, to which she understandably is creeped out, backs away, and then just runs. Yeah, what a weird episode. I'm not a fan of this one. I think by just saying the title of this episode, you'll understand why I have it ranked so low. The Rise of Zim. It's disgusting. And the joke of why is there bacon in the soap is not good enough to save this episode. Zim gets a zit that expands and Gur draws on it and it can hypnotize people. He calls it Postulio, and he uses it on Dib to learn a secret that Dib knows about his base. And then it swells, explodes, and deluges everyone in the juices. It's disgusting. It's vile. It's horrible. Who decided to greenlight this? No one wanted this. No one asked to see this. What the hell were they thinking with this one? Come on, Joan and Vasquez. Do better next time. There's just not too much I have to say about the episode Walk of Doom. I just kind of find it boring. I'm bored by the wacky misadventures that Zim and Gur get up to in this episode. And why did Gur take out the chip? I know it's for the sake of comedy, but the cupcake isn't that big. I'm sure it could have fit as well as the chip. I don't know, but I do find the fact that the human disguise that Zim created for this episode just happened to be identical to the guy who robbed the bank that one day. And given how early in the series this episode is, and the fact that they end up in Mexico at the end of the episode, my personal headcanon is that their time in Mexico is where Zim picked up the ability to speak Spanish, and where Gur gained his love for Mexican food. Presumably, just like the Latin American Spanish countries, Zim will bring doom down upon anyone who dare uses Vosotros. While this episode in retrospect is a fun look at the fact that Zim's true status is as a food service drone, I just don't really enjoy Careerdale that much. The whole conflict with the Equinox molt is both disgusting and honestly a pretty weak excuse for the conflict to occur. I do get a decent amount of enjoyment out of the plot with Dib and the paranormal investigator and how fed up Dib gets with him without realizing the irony that that's how he sounds to other people. And, side note, I know they don't appear in this episode, but we never get an explanation of how Dib joins the Swollen Eyeball Network. How did they scout him? When did he join? How long has he been a member? Any of that? We never get any explanation of them, and I'm surprised that that was never a priority for them to explain. It just kind of felt weird that, in this episode, there's this fake paranormal investigator who's clearly not part of the Swollen Eyeball Network, but then later there's this real group of paranormal investigators, and we just never get any explanation on them. Whatever. We just roll with it when they show up. Oh hey, I was just talking about the Swollen Eyeball Network in the last segment. This is definitely the episode where they have the most amount of agents shown and probably their most significant appearance, but, whatever. So you remember how with the most horrible Xmas ever, I said that there were 2 episodes that kind of felt non-canon? Well, this is the other one. That whole 3D intro at the start just starts us off with a weird feeling, and I don't know, this whole episode just doesn't feel canon. It feels like one of those, like, Invader Zim adventures you'd find on, like, a Flash game or something. I don't know. It's bizarre, but also not really that funny. I like to think, though, that Gur did tell Zim that the camera was there from the start, and that Zim was just messing with Dib, knowing that he was watching. But that said, how exactly did Zim manage to reprogram the cyborg zombie soldiers that the hideous mutant squid brought? And also, how did the hideous mutant squid get cyborg zombie soldiers? I don't know. It's weird, but hey, at least Nick was there. He was cool. Unfortunately for it, the pilot could not escape the bottom 10 for this series, but on the other hand, it is a good sign that the pilot ranks pretty low, meaning that the show got better past its original inception. The narration at the start, I presume, is only there so the executives understand the show's premise and don't ask questions. I haven't seen too many pilots, so maybe it's more commonplace. The animation, though, is very noticeably rougher. I really don't like the human characters' teeth. They're very uncanny, and the art style is just not very refined. It's very rough. Dib's shirt is yellow, and Zim is not voiced by Ricky Horvitz yet. He's voiced by Billy West, who ended up not taking the role because, he was busy working on Futurama back in 1999. But, yeah, I'm glad that Ricky Horvitz ended up getting the job. This does still feel like Invader Zim at its core, just a beta version of Invader Zim, which makes sense for what it is. However, there is more to talk about in terms of some cut ideas for the show. See, in the original planning, Gaz was meant to be Zim's ally, and they briefly considered making her Zim's love interest. And, well, I just don't think that would have ever worked without some pretty serious retooling of the characters. First, Zim's personality and Gaz's would need to be softened for them to have some sort of romantic interest in each other. And secondly, well, Gaz is an 11-year-old girl. Zim's age has never been defined, and the showrunners seem to have some disagreement. Some have suggested he's approximately 160, which equates to 16, but, I mean, how would you feel if a 16-year-old was dating an 11-year-old? I'm pretty sure we'd all think that's weird. And, some people have just suggested that he is a young adult, which can mean a lot of things from teenager to, actual adult that's young, but who knows. Either way, I don't think that kind of plot would have ever worked without Gaz and Zim and Dib, well, mostly Gaz and Dib, just being, older characters, so I'm glad that that was ultimately dropped, because it just never would have worked with them being in elementary school like this. So, while I'm glad they cut the romance aspect, I'm sad that they cut the idea of Gaz being Zim's ally in general. Apparently in the original version of the pilot, there was a scene where she helped him recover from the food allergy that he had suffered, and I wish that was kept. The series tries to treat Gaz like she's the 4th main character of the show, but she's barely relevant in the series, and her movie iteration is an entirely different character. I think that making her an ally to Zim fits in her character given her general dislike of humanity. I mean, I thought that way even when I first watched the show as a teenager. I was like, why isn't Gaz helping Zim? I mean, I know she's pretty apathetic, but I don't know, it always felt like it was weird that she wasn't helping him. It would at the very least have given her more to do, given that she essentially has nothing to do in the series outside of her couple starring episodes and the couple times where she needs to help out Dib, so I don't know. I would have liked it if the show had included that, but it is what it is. I lament the version of Gaz that actually had stuff to do, so oh well. The pilot ain't too bad, and I can see why it got picked up eventually. Dipship Rising feels like they had sort of a decent idea, but they got stuck with it along the way, and they realized there wasn't really a good way to end it. So, Dib erases the personality matrix on Tech's ship and uploads his own, but because the process is basically like the electric chair, he can't stop it until the ship absorbs so much of his personality that it can no longer recognize itself as an Urkin ship, and instead it thinks that it is the real Dib, and that Dib is an imposter sent by Zim. I do like how Dib, kind of realizes how annoying he is when having to deal with the Dib ship, but that doesn't really go anywhere. And ultimately, Zim does the exact same thing as he did back in Backseat Drivers from Beyond the Stars and orders it to obey as a piece of Urkin technology. What a surprise. Also, the ending with it having its life flash before its eyes really, really slowly while it's erasing itself is I don't know. It was kind of lame, if I'm gonna be honest. And Tech Ship has its personality back in the movie, so how did that happen? Does it have a backup? Forget it. The movie sucks. I'm considering it non-canon. Screw the movie. While selling cookies door to door, the little Girl Scout Moofy gets her foot stuck in the ground, and a media circus is summoned right to Zim's house as they all come to see the girl who cried gnome. Dib, who I guess was just passing by, being a creep at trying to spy on Zim, tries to use this opportunity to expose him on national television. Zim had a plan that would destroy the Earth that he gave to Mr. President Man, but Dib gave Mr. President Man an alternative and also bribed him with the cookies that were stuck in the back of his head. And there are a bunch of attempts by the media to pull her out of the ground, but she keeps resisting, and Dib eventually figures out that Moofy just likes the attention. And you know what? In the end, Zim ends up the hero. He just approaches her from behind before she can realize what's going on and yanks her out. And yeah, Zim's the hero of Earth. And I do find it kind of oddly poetic that at the very end, everyone leaves Dib alone once his foot gets stuck in the ground. Like, yeah, it's also because he's not, you know, a cute little girl that'll make good TV when she's on TV. But it's also interesting because Dib is the boy who cried wolf. He's yelled paranormal, he's called freak on so many different people that, you know, no one in the world believes him when he tries to alert them about Zim because he's been wrong so many other times. And, you know, they all ignore him, you know, they all leave him here on the ground, and no one believes him about Zim. You know, it's almost like poetry, you know, they rhyme. After accidentally screwing up an experiment with a time stasis field that he trapped Dib in, Zim's base explodes. Wait, time stasis field? Zim, you just invented the friggin' time stasis field? This guy is insane. It makes sense that his original job was a scientist. Anyway, aside from the first explosion, there's another explosion from the time stasis field that is exploding extremely slowly. So the citizens of the city must walk for their lives. For some reason, Zim thinks that dumping it in the city cesspool will stop it. And, side note, what's his deal with dumping things in the city cesspool? He does it here first, and then he tries to do it to Dib and Dib Ship Rising, so what's up with that? I don't know, but either way, we never find out whether that would have worked, because while he gets it very close, a dog thwarts him at the last moment. And eventually, Zim, unable to think of anything else to do, decides to launch Dib into the explosion to return them both to normal speed by matching up their frequencies. And he thinks this will solve things? I mean, it does return them both to normal speed, and the explosion destroys the entire city, so, victory for Zim? Yay? Question mark? In this episode, Zim meets his true nemesis, the almighty nuclear punching bee. I mean, it looks like a normal bee, but Zim's right, there's no way that thing is genuinely just a regular human bee given that it punches through the Vort Cruiser, and Vort Cruisers are meant to be, like, way more powerful than anything on Earth, so how the hell did that happen? Anyway, after being downed by a bee where a UFO convention is about to be held, the ship gets captured and worshipped by the Saucer Morons. And yeah, it's kind of like an attack. They're all sort of meant to be like a parody of UFO enthusiasts, and, you know, it's kind of funny how much they worship it and Zim when they realize who he really is. It's like, they're all just like, gasping in, like, shock when he's just, like, scratching his butt, which is really funny. At the end, though, Gur actually locks in because he pilots a government man robot, and he doesn't actually break character. Like, he's very good at staying in the government man character, operating the suit, convincing the other people. Like, I think that's the longest he stayed in duty mode outside of Gur goes crazy and stuff, and he didn't even have to be insane. He was just focused on rescuing Zim, which is cool, so props to him. And yeah, it's kind of funny to think about that Zim's worst nemesis would probably be Barry B. Benson, if you think about it, so yeah. Much to her own chagrin, Miss Bitter's class is given a pet hamster that will make them happier. Zim, having a pretty brilliant idea actually, decides to grow the poor animal into a giant monster that will destroy the city, but also no one will stop it because it's too dang cute. And this actually works? I mean, good for Zim, but unfortunately his mind control tech isn't strong enough, so the hamster stops listening to him, and Zim reluctantly kills it off by launching it into space, once again becoming the hero of Earth. You know, this episode's fine, but I always felt that the best part of the episode has nothing to do with the hamster. Instead, it's the part where Zim sits down and watches the Angry Monkey Show with Gur. That like 1 5-second clip, best part of the whole episode. So I'm sure some of you invaders out there are a little bit surprised to see Mortoast or Soul Stealer this high up and outside of the bottom 10. Well, I was looking up some trivia about this episode while making this video, and Jonan Vasquez actually made a statement that you weren't allowed to rank this episode lower than 34th place in the series. You just have to look up Mortoast or Soul Stealer Rule 34 and you'll get all the information. Anyway, the reason I have this episode as high as it is just because I think it's kind of funny. It's not boring, it's not drawn out, it's not like cringe, there's just some funny stuff. And you know, there's obviously the iconic Dib and Zim yelling at each other across the street, but I also love the running gag of Dib getting blamed for stuff and also being forced to pay for all the stuff that Mortoast wants because he has no money. And how the wish is wasted at the very end of the episode. I really like this as a Dib episode. It's kind of fun to see it go all wrong for him in just a completely ridiculous way. Mortoast may not be the best guy, but Dib isn't either, so I can't say I fully blame Mortoast for not really taking Dib too seriously. Also, Dib is a harasser of puppies and he got charged for it. Lock him up. Germs is one of those episodes that I like because it expands on Zim's character. After watching a War of the Worlds parody, Zim decides to research if germs are really that bad and proceeds to have a total meltdown after seeing germs everywhere in his base. Because he develops an incessant need for sterile environments, he seeks out a more permanent solution than the disinfectant cans that start to run out. He finally decides to use the space meat from McMeaties because he discovers that they are completely immune to germs. And I'm not exactly sure how this works going forward, because we see Zim in like that meat suit at the end of the episode, but I think that he uses it going forward. Like he uses like some type of meat paste in the future episodes that we just don't see, kind of like how he uses the paste to protect himself from acid rain after the wetting. But whatever it is, it's cool and I like it. So, you know, fun to give depth to characters. In this episode, Zim faces off with the titular Planet Jackers when they decide to hijack Earth and throw it into their dying sun, despite the fact that the Urkins have a peace treaty with the Planet Jackers to not mess with any of their planets. Because, you know, Zim's mission isn't real. And also, that's not how suns work. Like, if you throw matter into the sun, that's not gonna make it, like, burn longer, so the Planet Jackers are stupid too, but, you know, it is what it is. Zim decides to fight off the Planet Jackers, but they beat the crap out of him, but fortunately, it's really just a ruse to distract them from the fact that he cuts up their giant space dome and frees the Earth, though I really have no idea how Zim ends up towing the Earth back to its proper space, but I'll assume he figured it out somehow. Now, despite both me and the show pretty much always telling Zim that his mission is not real, there is something interesting that was stated by Jonan Vasquez. The Control Brains, who are the real leaders of Urk, actually logged Earth as a potential planet for conquest, meaning that, on some level, Zim's mission is legitimate. My guess is that the Control Brains, after they knew that Zim was on Earth, decided, well, if he actually conquers the Earth, we're not going to turn down something to be part of our empire, so sure, why not? They didn't undo his banishment because he wasn't there, but they're like, well, we'll just, you know, if he succeeds at conquering it, we'll add it to the list. If not, you know, he's still effectively banished. So, you know, that's pretty cool. Before we move on, though, I did want to comment on Zim's character. The showrunners have stated that they don't believe that Zim is stupid, and I agree. Zim defeats every alien opponent who stands in his way, not necessarily through brute force, but sometimes by outsmarting them like he did in this episode. And he even defeats Dib at multiple points. But they did state that Zim is incredibly bad at setting priorities and cannot recognize his own flaws. And those two things together sort of ruin him in most cases. So, basically, as far as I can figure, he has super extreme alien ADHD, so, you know, I guess that's pretty cool. Zim gets to experience something that those saucer morons from earlier would have loved as he gets abducted by a pair of zookeeping aliens. Fortunately for him, these guys are so stupid that Zim immediately escapes and heads for the exit of the ship. The only reason there's a full episode is because he has to traverse the ship looking for the way out. So, you might be wondering, why was he captured? Well, these aliens are stupid and they believe he's a perfect human specimen, so they believe his disguise completely. So even when Zim takes off his disguise, they don't believe him. I love role reversal episodes. It's so fun to see Zim prove that he's not a human to these aliens, so they'll let him go, and it just doesn't work. But yeah. Personally, my favorite part of the episode is the beginning and the ending, where Zim is telling the tallest about the humans and how they're both tall and stupid. And what's great about it is that the tallest are just like not making fun of him or bullying him. They're just like genuinely interested in what he's saying, and it's like, I don't know. I like that brief moment where they're just like, yo, this is actually kind of like interesting to learn about, you know? Shame we couldn't have had more of those moments, but oh well. Dib gets to embrace his inner time looper in this episode, as he meets a future version of himself that failed to stop Zim and got sent back in time. So now the future Dib and the present Dib will team up to stop Zim from things going wrong like it did in his future, so that's good for him. But, you know, present Dib doesn't realize the extremely obvious twist that's about to happen, and I assume the only reason is because he's a bit too egotistical. But personally, I choose to believe this is the last episode in the Invader Zim timeline sequentially, and that Gaz used the defeated Dib robot as her servant for the rest of her life, and Dib was similarly trapped in the cage being slapped by the monkey for the rest of his life while Zim and Gur watched. AKA the good ending. This is once again a pretty good Dib episode. In this one, he goes on a quest to disprove the obviously fake cryptid of Chickenfoot after seeing it on Mysterious Mysteries. I think this episode shows that under the right circumstances, Dib can be a pretty good protagonist, just not when he's facing off with Zim. Looking at you, enter the Florpus. Anyway, Dib tracks down Chickenfoot, and after plenty of convincing, chasing, and arguing, manages to free the guy from the chicken suit. But all is not well, as across town, Taco Foot is born. The biggest question I have after this episode is, will that guy ever really get his slaw? So, why the hell does Professor Membrane have such intense security for his TV show audience? Well, hell if I know, but apparently Dib never knew either, because we have to follow him as he tries to win an audience with his dad's show to get a permission slip signed. I mean, maybe he was just at home all the other times that either Dib or Gaz needed a permission slip signed and this was just an inconvenient timing, but I don't know. Either way, this is a Dib and Gaz episode, where Gaz is constantly sabotaging Dib because he ate the last slice of her pizza, meaning that, although unintentionally, Gaz is actually protecting Zim by stopping her brother from getting what he wants, even though it's just for her own selfish purposes. And, you know, even though Dib eventually does get the signature despite all of Gaz's efforts, he forgets his presentation and therefore can't do anything to the Swollen Eyeball Network, which he was about to present to, so, sucks to be him. And, also, if those tests were real, I don't think it would ever be worth it to get into Membrane's audience. Like, what the hell, man? After failing to have 100% school spirit all the time, the class president is executed in front of everyone, and two candidates are now chosen to face off to see who will be the new one. In one corner, we of course have Zim, and the other one is Willie, who we technically saw at some point before, but he's this big oaf-like student, and Dib decides to help him out to win the election after Dib is unable to run against Zim. This doesn't particularly go well at first, as Zim has the students won over, but Dib eventually just gives Willie a walkie-talkie and tells him to repeat everything he says, and Dib is smart enough to outmaneuver Zim and overpromise things to the point where all the students end up voting for Willie, or at least the majority of them. But as it turns out, this was actually a good thing for Zim, as the student council president gets brainwashed by the faculty, and so Willie becomes someone completely different, and, you know, good thing for Zim, he didn't get brainwashed like that. You know, so good on Dib for saving Zim from a terrible fate. Fun fact though, Gaz is actually heard cheering in this episode for Zim and is shown to be approving of what Zim is saying during the debate. Yet we see her vote for Willie. And maybe it's because she knew what would happen, or maybe people are just overanalyzing things. Who can say? But at least everyone got some salted nuts, right? Dib pulls off the most epic revenge prank against Zim by throwing a muffin at his head. Or, as Zim calls it, a pork cow. Zim swears revenge at whoever threw it, and he runs off to find out. Fortunately for Dib, though, this is just the start of his winning streak. The Microbians show up and give him special, undefined powers to defeat Zim. And he actually doesn't use them at all, because when he goes to Zim, he just explains a bunch of things, and Zim just immediately surrenders. Wow, that was easy. After that, we get to see Dib's whole life unfold. He goes hunting around the world revealing cryptids, and everybody loves and believes him, including tons of women. He even defeats the Urkan Armada when they show up, which I guess is the in-show proof that the Control Brains marked the planet for conquest, and it's further proof that Enter the Florpus is utterly stupid. Anyway, at the end of the long life, Dib reminisces on a talk show, admitting that he was the one who threw the muffin. He probably then thinks he goes senile as everybody turns into Zim laughing at him, but as it turns out, everything after the muffin was just a ginormous simulation that Zim put Dib in to find out the truth. It's very excessive, but also very Zim. And, Zim gets his revenge by throwing a muffin at Dib in return, so good for him. After realizing that people think he's weird for having no friends, Zim decides that he needs to find one. His criteria for choosing one is rather confusing, but eventually he settles on Keith, one of the loser reject kids according to the popular girl, and he shows off to everyone that he has a friend. Everyone still treats him like a loser, but he's a loser who has a friend, so good for him. But I do question why, at the halfway point, Zim sends Keith away. Like, if he does that, people are still going to assume that he has no friends now. Like, I don't know if he really thought that one through. But, Keith returns trying to have a party, and Zim has to fight him off. So, Zim rips out his eyes and makes him think a squirrel is him, so he goes crazy. Pretty dark, and Keith was meant to die here originally, but, Nickelodeon doesn't want characters to die, especially children, so Keith is immortal and he lives through this. And, we see him in the future of the show in, the background, and he doesn't have his robot eyes, so I guess he got those fixed or something, so, good for him. In another effort to get rid of Zim, the tallest demand that he takes a lot more training before they grant his request for supplies, and they send him off to the training planet of Hobo 13, where they expect him to die. Unfortunately, while Zim proves himself to be a terrible leader with how he sacrifices everyone, he does actually still get all the way to the end and defeats the Sergeant. I mean, you think Zim could have probably come up with some ways to get through without sacrificing people, like, in the laser segment, he programmed them to fire at one person in specific, but, he could have just turned them off at that point, and, maybe he could have done the same at other places, but that's just who Zim is. This episode shows us that Scooge survived after the tallest killed him back in Battle of the Planets, but, he got better, so, and he'll also get better after this one. But, the tallest were running a betting ring against him, and they forced a random service drone to bet in Zim's favor for 500,000 monies, which multiplies like hell because, Zim survives and everyone else is betting against him. So Bob wins several million monies and Zim gets his supplies. Unfortunately, the tallest tricked him and sent him on a ship of his own that was programmed to fly directly into a star. But Zim survived, so that's just how it goes. Tallest can't get rid of him. Maybe I was just lucky, but my school never actually had a lice outbreak, and we had no lice checks in the nurse's office. I really only found out about those apparently being real from ASMR content creators, where people in the comments section talked about how it happened to them as kids, so I don't know, maybe my school was just lucky to never have an outbreak. So, Melvin brings the lice to school and they immediately infect everyone, making sure that he stays a loser because he already was considered one. The anti-lice squad is called in, and Dib is pretty frustrated thinking that this is all, kind of overhyped for just a bunch of lice, but Dib, come on. No one likes lice, you could at least agree to the treatment, bruh. But he thinks that the leader of the lice squad is this crazy conspiracy lady who believes in this lice queen, which he doesn't think is real, and he fails to realize the irony in his whole situation. And especially considering she turns out to be right, and her lackeys end up determining that Zim's skin cells kill lice, so they put him into a gun that liquefies his skin and it kills all lice on the planet, so, Dib fails to learn any sort of lesson from this, and Zim saves humanity again. So, all is as it should be. Welcome to the one and only official appearance of Tak, everybody. It's kind of crazy how many fans she has, given that really, this is the only time she appears in the entire series. And it's also the Valentine's Day episode special. So, basically, Zim thinks this new girl at school, Tak, is flirting with him and decides to return the gestures to appear more human. But as we figure out pretty quickly, Tak hates him, and we eventually learn that it's because she's actually an Urkin who has a much better disguise. Presumably Zim could have done it himself as well, but I guess he just chose not to, because he's lazy or something. Anyway, despite the fact that she claims that she doesn't care about getting revenge on Zim, her entire plan of stealing his mission is revenge, so I really don't know why she tried to make the distinction there. That really doesn't make any sense. But yeah, only through the combined efforts of all of our 4 heroes is the day saved, and Tak is sent flying into deep space, presumably never to be seen again. She was planned to appear in the unfinished episode Top of the Line, and also in Enter the Florpus, but, Top of the Line was never finished, and Enter the Florpus wrote her out of the script. They also did potentially set up for her return at the end, but there's been no follow-up on the end of Enter the Florpus, so, that never came to be either. As I'm sure you can tell by the placement in the list, I neither particularly like or dislike this episode. I think I just kind of don't care that much about Tak. Like, she works as a good antagonist in this episode, but I don't know, I never really got super invested in her character. I mean, maybe I would have liked her if she had more appearances, such as the ones I discussed, and, they worked together to form a more interesting character, but I don't know, I just don't really care. This is her only appearance, so I don't really have that much time to get invested in her. And no, her ship personality does not count, so yeah, it's only this episode. Now, while I personally do like Rain quite a bit, we learn in The Wetning that Zim certainly doesn't. This is the first episode where he encounters Rain, and it appears to be toxic to him, but Jonan Vasquez would later state that it's not rain itself, it's the fact that it's like toxic acid rain, because pollution, and Zim's actually okay with clean water. Anyway, after discovering this, Dib decides to cash in. He starts a water fight with Zim, and after Zim gets him back, he promises vengeance come Monday. So, Zim and Dib both work tirelessly throughout the weekend to make sure they're ready. And Zim learns that paste will defend his skin from the acid rain, and Dib makes a pretty impressive water balloon machine. Unfortunately, he gets tricked by Zim's hologram, and he did not realize that Zim would go so far as to build a ginormous space station, suck up all the water from the city, and then use all of it to fling a city-sized water balloon right at Dib's head, which, it's just so great. I love when Zim takes these really small, petty things so seriously just to destroy Dib, and, it's great to see. I love it. I love this episode for that reason. The episode where it all began. The nightmare begins. This is the episode that had to start everything, and, it does a really good job of setting everything up. The intimidating yet silly air that we have for the Urkins, Zim's relentless enthusiasm and energy to conquer everything, Dib's relentless energy to try to prove that he's an alien, Gur's stupidity, the Earth's stupidity, there's so much that goes into setting up a series, and this episode does it very well. Honestly, the only thing it really doesn't do is set up Gaz very well, but I guess it does set up the fact that she's going to be getting the short end of the stick consistently for almost the entire series, so yay, question mark? But, I don't know, this episode is just very good, it's... You've seen this episode. It's very good, it's very iconic, it's just a great way to start the series, It got better after this, but this was just a great way to start. I do still feel sorry for Dib sometimes. Despite his judgmental and prideful personality, at its core is still a lonely kid who just wants to save the world and be loved and accepted by his peers. I'd feel a bit more sorry for him if the show didn't show that he's definitely earned his bad reputation and the ire of the others, but still, it can be a bit sad, such as in this episode, Vindicated. So, Dib is forced to go to the counselor's office after he knocks Zim's disguise off in a dodgeball game, and Zim somehow manages to convince all the others that it's normal. But Dib is actually pretty shocked to learn that the counselor believes him about Zim being an alien, and believes in aliens in general, so he agrees to help Dib catch Zim. But, as we find out pretty quickly, he's just humoring Dib because he thinks there's more going on, and this whole alien thing is just sort of a cover for his real problems. it is pretty funny that the aliens that they pretend to be were actually real and they showed up, and they ended up giving Zim a bunch of super weapons that they're just like, fuck it, we just have a bunch of it. Here you go. We don't need them. And Mr. Dwicky got to live out his happy ending because he got to actually see aliens, which is, it was actually his childhood dream. He used to believe in aliens and doesn't anymore, but he got his happy ending going to, go explore the galaxy with them. Too bad he took Dib's evidence with him, and, Dib ended up sad again, but in some ways, he deserves it a bit. Even by Invader Zim standards, this episode is pretty weird. So, Zim and Gur are spotted without their disguises on inside their ship returning to base by a baby. Gur tries to assure Zim that there's no actual threat, but Zim's paranoia over the mission being compromised turns out to actually be correct, as the baby who spotted them just so happens to be part of an alien race that looks exactly like human babies, and were stranded on Earth for a number of years and have been waiting for an alien ship to appear so they could take it and escape. What in the hell are the odds of that? So, unfortunately for them, however, they've never had to contend with Zim, and Zim uses Gur's psychic stupid attack to defeat them and turn them into real babies. As I mentioned before, I just like seeing Zim outwit his opponents, especially other aliens who he never loses against. Despite his insanity, he's a very capable and intelligent combatant, and I like seeing him, be able to do that. But the Giganto baby was really terrifying. What the hell was up with that? Even more baffling than Taximany fans are the many fans of Invader 10 who makes her one and only appearance in this episode. Like, at least Tak was the main character of her episode, 10 barely plays a role in the episode Mega Doomer. Some people seem to like her because of her slight physical similarities to Zim, and think that they might be Irkin's siblings or the closest equivalent to. Some people seem to like her because she was assigned the planet Mikrob, and that's one of Irk's greatest enemies, so she must be really well respected and competent if she was assigned such a planet. And some people just seem to like her because they like her. Either way though, all this progress is for naught because an Irkin prisoner switches the packages that are going to be sent to her and Zim, so 10 gets the malfunctioning Sur units and Zim gets the Mega Doomer mech. The Tallest also apparently don't care when her mission gets completely destroyed by this blunder, as they just stand there just sitting, not doing anything. Like, you'd think they'd care about that planet above all others, but I guess not. I know I didn't spend any time really talking about the episode in this segment, but I feel like it stands for itself. This is a very solid episode with Zim's antics, which is the majority of the episode. A bit silly, but it's very good. I love Mega Doomer, and you know what? I like 10 to some extent, more so than Tak. Dib has taken a picture of Zim outside of his costume. Hey! So Zim must stop him from sending it off to mysterious mysteries, so Zim pulls a bit of a pro-gamer move and shrinks himself down in his ship and enters Dib's body. And the episode is just a lot better than a lot of episodes of TV shows that have someone shrinking down and entering someone else's body, because Zim is just trying to destroy Dib, so he successfully makes Dib crush the disc that he was about to send, and he goes up to his mind and deletes the memories of where he has his backups, which I figured that Dib could probably just find it by searching through his room, but whatever, it never comes up again. And he's about to destroy Dib's entire mind, but Gaz actually saves her brother because she thinks that Dib and Zim are just playing an online game, and completely crushes him in the process. I love that that's how this episode gets resolved. It's really great for Gaz. This episode is this high mostly just because of how utterly ridiculous it is. So, Zim tricks all the members of Miss Bitters' class except for himself into going on a field trip, and they're launched into space and sent into a wormhole. Zim explains to Dib via robot that there were many horrible destinations he could have chosen for the wormhole, but the one he chose to send them all to is a room with a moose, which is certainly something. Dib doesn't understand how it's so bad, but Zim then feeds the moose some nuts, and then suddenly Dib realizes how horrible it is. I feel like the joke here is just supposed to be that it's so ridiculous that this is somehow terrifying, but it is what it is. Anyway, Dib tries to explain to everyone what's going on, but no one believes him. Fortunately for him, everybody hating him is what saves them in the end, as none of them want to sit on the same side of the bus as him, and all he has to do is sit with them so that they all go to the other side to get them out of there. So, I guess great job on Dib for everyone hating him, question mark. But, yeah, I don't know. Would you want to go to a room with a moose? I don't think so. As it turns out, Dib can't even win when he wins. He successfully manages to film Zim and Gur without their disguises on, and gets sent to Mysterious Mysteries, and gets it on the show, and Zim doesn't stop him. And so, it should all be good for him, right? Well, unfortunately, although they do invite Dib on, they also invite Zim, Gur, and Gaz, and all four of them get to retell the story from their own perspective, and the dramatic reenactments that they all get to see are just... they're so great. They're the best part of the episode. And, you know, all ends as it should, with Dib being declared crazy and Zim being declared non-alien. So, even when Dib has all the cards on his side, he still loses. Rip Bozo, I guess. Using the mysterious spell drives that he owns, Dib casts a curse on his sister that makes everything taste like pork to her. Terrified of her vengeance, he decides to take her to their father to see if it can be resolved scientifically. He knows it can't, but he basically uses it as a stalling tactic so that he can try to figure it out on his own using paranormal methods. He sort of fails, and he even goes to Zim for help, who just outright refuses to help him. But eventually he gets a little bit of help from the Swollen Eyeball Network, and takes Gaz to the Shadow Hog's realm, and gets the curse reversed. Honestly though, Dib absolutely deserves the punishment of being forced to clean out his toilet, because he was a jerk. I mean, he cast that spell on his sister, like, she didn't ask for that. You could have been brave enough to do it on your own, like, come on. But my favorite part of the episode is Gaz's terrifying stuffed animal security robots. That was a cool thing to add to her. Zim manages to discover that Mars is actually a giant planet ship, and so he decides to use it to crush the Earth. Unfortunately for him, Dib is right behind him, as Mercury is also a planet ship and he uses it to fight off Zim. This is the episode where we meet Agent Darkbooty's alter ego, who is the janitor at NASA Place. Not NASA, NASA Place, so that, you know, it's copyright free or whatever. And we also get to see that watching and mocking Zim is a favorite pastime of a bunch of Urkins who live on the Massive, so, you know, that's interesting. I don't know, I just really like this episode. It's really fun just to see Dib and Zim duke it out for the whole runtime, and, you know, get to see a little bit of, you know, maybe dated CGI, but it's still cool looking. It's a very good episode, and I like seeing the Battle of the Planets. Zim's Halloween special made it the highest of the holiday specials, but it still falls just short of the top 10. It's still very great though, so don't get me wrong there. They go all in on the horror, as we find out in the plot of this episode that Dib used his dad's dimensional scope to peer into another dimension, and now he keeps flickering between each dimension, slowly starting to stay longer and longer in the nightmare dimension, and he fears he'll eventually be trapped there. Later in the episode they explain that this nightmare dimension is just in Dib's head, which is like, why? I don't know, it kind of feels like it raises some questions that make the episode a little bit less good, but that's really the only problem with it. The villain of this episode is the nightmare version of Miss Bitters, who wants to lead her army into Dib's world by opening a portal in his head. Literally. During one of the flashes, Dib eventually drags Zim into the alternate reality, and he even tries to throw Zim under the bus. Zim ends up rescuing him because he has to get the portal back to their dimension, but, you know, Zim, let's say, is not happy, and Nightmare Bitters ends up being scared off by Gur, who looks pretty terrifying at the end of the episode. But I will say, even though it's at number 11, this episode does have my favorite joke in the entire franchise, and that's the two monsters that get sent to the realm of eternal screaming and restlessness. Just the way they played out is just so great. If you've watched it, you know. I love this episode. As I mentioned way at the start of this list, Bad Bad Rubber Piggy is how you do a dark episode bad. Now how you do a dark episode good is in this episode, Dark Harvest. So, Zim contracts head pigeons, and Dib tells Zim that the nurse will realize he isn't a human due to the lack of human organs, so Zim decides he must steal enough of them from the other students, and replace their organs with random objects while he takes said organs. And yeah, so Zim decides to go on a complete rampage, and despite Dib's insistence that it'll never work with how many organs he ends up stealing, it completely fools the nurse. And I don't know, I just love seeing that Zim is a real threat in this episode. He just goes after the students, and it's pretty freaky, yeah. So, I like this episode. It's how you do a dark episode well. Also, in this episode, we learn that Gaz is actually an Urkin. Who would have thunk? In this Gaz-focused episode, we have Gaz wanting to buy the new Game Slave 2. Unfortunately for her, Professor Membrane says she has to take her brother with her, and Dib says she has to wait until he's finished watching Mysterious Mysteries. She ends up at the back of a really long line, and right behind her is this really annoying kid named Iggins. She's forced to endure him talking for several hours, and right when she gets to the front of the store, Iggins tricks the store employee and steals the Game Slave from right under her nose. And she swears vengeance on Iggins, declaring that she will plunge him into a nightmare realm of which there is no waking. She basically does this, following Iggins around and freaking him out until he finally gives up. Gaz seems to have powers in this episode, though Jonan Vasquez would beg to differ. He stated that he doesn't think Gaz has any powers and she's just not someone you want to make angry. But the other showrunners, and I believe even Gaz's voice actors, all seem to disagree with him, so I guess it's up to interpretation. I really like this episode, and I'm of the opinion that Gaz does have powers, because that's more fun. Great episode, but Dib is lost in the parking garage forever. RIP. While I don't feel like I would have liked Robo Parents Gone Wild very much, I do very much love Parent-Teacher Night. Like many of the best episodes of Invader Zim, it's just full of so many great gags, like the iconic aspirin joke. Honestly, I don't really have a ton to say about this episode, like, Zim has to take his parents to Parent-Teacher Night, and, shenanigans ensue. There's so much that's great about this episode. The tape that Miss Bitters has of Zim, the squeezing arm joke, the throwing of the punch, it's just a banger. Just watch this episode. It's really funny, I promise. This was Gaz's very first starring episode, and my personal favorite of the three. And it's the only time that she actually directly chooses to fight Zim, but really she only does it because she needs Dib to be present for family dinner, as their dad won't come otherwise, and she really wants to go to Bluey's Pizza Hog. And, it's just really funny how easy it is for her. She just walks into Zim's base, intimidates Gur into obeying her, and frees her brother, and arrives back on Earth after defeating Zim in a space battle. You might be wondering, how does Gaz pilot this alien tech so well that she's never encountered? Well, like I said back in Dark Harvest, it's because she's an Urkin. I do think it's kind of funny that the only reason she doesn't let Zim experiment on Dib is because she worries that her dad wouldn't accept, them going out if he's in, in a state that he's been experimented on. But she did consider it, so I find that very funny. Zim has finally had enough of Gur's insanity and decides to try to make him into what the other Sir units are. While he does succeed, he unintentionally triggers Gur's free will, and Gur begins to question why he's following Zim at all. Look, Zim may not be perfect and a little bit stupid, but Gur's logic here is really stupid as he decides to, with no disguise whatsoever, attack the library and drain a bunch of people's brains. Gur calls Zim a threat to the mission, but Gur's actions are way more of a threat to the mission. They're about to be exposed, If Zim hadn't stopped him and gotten them out of there, they probably would have been exposed to the outside world, so I think Gur is the real threat to the mission. That said, the episode is still very great. It's very funny. I like seeing things from Gur's perspective. It's just kind of a nice little exploration, a nice little what-if scenario. And Zim manages to defeat him in the end, and restores him to, his normal. Officer Squid was a great sidekick for Zim, though, even if he did get eaten by sharks at the end. Starting out our top 5, we get some backstory for Zim. Dib goes a bit crazy after no one believes him about Zim being an alien, and then suddenly a mysterious figure shows up and kidnaps Zim from the middle of school. It's Sizzlor, Zim's boss from when he was banished to the planet Foodcordia as a food service drone. He's come back after 20 years to make Zim work for him again. Even though it hasn't been 20 years, but there's some weird time warp thingy, according to him. Zim blocked the entire experience out, but now that he's remembered it and he's being forced to work for Sizzlor once more, and there's a bioscanner that will explode him if he tries to escape, Zim swears he'll escape regardless. Sizzlor really puts him through the ringer in this episode, but even against his own species, Zim cannot be stopped. With some assistance from the character Eric the Blob, Zim manages to escape and flees the planet just in time to escape the second foodening and trapping Sizzlor for another 20 years. Again, because of some weird time dilation thingy. The best character in this entire episode, and probably this entire series, is that random guy who Zim was sitting with when he was talking, and the guy wanted to know who Zim was and why he was talking to him. Banger episode on here. You guys remember having to sell candy bars for fundraising at your school? I know I sure did, but I was a failure at it. Like most people, I just sold a couple through my parents usually, and that's pretty much it. You know, I never actually went door to door. But in this episode, Zim decides that he must sell enough to get the mystery prize that's promised because he wants to know what it is. Zim is pretty bad at it at first, getting rejected constantly, but then he hallucinates a visit from Poop Dog, and Dib shows up to taunt him, and Zim decides he has to take this seriously. And just like the wedding, he blows it way out of proportion and uses mind control goggles to make everyone think that the world will end if they don't buy the candy bars. Zim may have defeated all of his classmates and sold enough candy bars for a literal avalanche of money, but Poop Dog always has the last laugh. As it turns out, the mystery prize was never real. That day, Zim learned that no one ever defeats the gangster specter of defeat. Our bronze medalist is Invasion of the Idiot Dog Brain. Zim's security system fails and Gur ends up as the new security brain. Zim repeatedly tries to get Gur to cooperate, but Gur's insanity means he doesn't. It takes a while, but Gur finally sees a taco commercial and, possessing the base, decides to head to Crazy Taco, causing a massive rampage in the process. Shout out to the random drive-thru worker though who saw Zim with no disguise on and just didn't care. Finally though, Gur does listen to Zim and allows him to repair things so that he can actually eat the tacos, as when he's in possession of the base, he can't because he has no mouth. Also fun fact, the guy who's on the phone in the phone booth talking about his car is actually based off of Gur's voice actor Ricky Simmons. He had bought an expensive car around the time of this episode, and the crew thought it'd be really funny to make a joke about it being destroyed. So the character here looks like Ricky Simmons, and yeah, that's why the random joke is there, because they just wanted to have a little bit of fun. Our silver medalist is FBI Warning of Doom. Basically, they made a whole episode of Zim freaking out over the FBI copyright warning that you see at the start of DVDs back when people actually used DVDs. By the way, if you pause the warning that you see in the show, it's not actually the official one, it's like a silly version that they wrote. Anyway, Zim misconstrues the FBI warning with the fact that he's getting calls from the video store that Gur rented the movie from, and they're threatening trouble if Zim does not return the movie. So Zim decides to break into the mall to return it. There he meets the best side character in the entire franchise, Sergeant Slab Rankle, a guy who's in charge of mall security and really does not like the fact that Zim broke in and is trying to return the movie. Zim manages to do so anyway, but it's just really funny all the things that Slab Rankle throws in Zim's way. He has so much security. I love how he laughs at Zim when he asks if he's with the FBI and calls them like small fries in comparison to him, mall security. I love that he has just a zombie army even though they suck at being a zombie army. I like how he offers Zim to join him at the end, being like, "You defeated me, but together we can rule all malls." It's just so great to see a character who takes something as small as mall security as seriously as Zim takes, the wetting or door to door. Like, he took those situations so seriously. Slab Rankle is basically doing the same thing for mall security. I love this guy so much. This is just the second best episode in all of Invader Zim. It's so great, it's so awesome, but there's just one more that's a little bit better. And I think all of you have probably guessed by now what that episode is. At the start of this list, I stated that there was no true community consensus on what the worst episode of the series was. However, I could find a general consensus for what the best one was. Some people may have disagreed, but the majority of the fandom seems to agree that Backseat Drivers from Beyond the Stars is the best episode, and I agree. This is the episode that is the reason that the plot of Enter the Florpus makes no sense, but if we wanted to talk about how Enter the Florpus makes no sense, we'd be here all day. Anyway, this episode starts with a 3-hour-long gag of Zim yelling "my tallest" over and over again. Okay, it's only actually like a minute, but the joke is that Ricky Horvitz was just told to yell "my tallest" over and over again, and so he kept doing so, waiting for Jonan Vasquez to tell him to stop, and Jonan Vasquez was just waiting for Ricky Horvitz to stop, and that's how we got all of those. Anyway, Zim notices that the tallest are nearby in space and invites them over for a picnic. Unfortunately, Zim made sandwiches and not lots of spaghetti, so they refused his invitation. So, in response to that, Zim decides to hack the Massive's controls and bring them to Earth whether they want to be there or not. It won't be quite that easy, however, as Div uses Tack's ship as well as a bug he planted in Zim's base to hack in, and also take control of the Massive, so the two have to fight. Meanwhile, a ragtag group of races conquered by the Urkins show up in their own ship, and they would have gotten annihilated by the Massive if Zim didn't hijack the Massive right at that time and gave them an opening to attack. Meanwhile, Zim also has to balance the situation with the robo-parents as they're attacking a human, as well as the brain-eating squid he made who he doesn't want to escape containment. This episode has several plots going on, but they all feel pretty appropriately addressed. Nothing really gets too much or too little time. I really like how Tallest Red takes command of the Massive in this emergency while Tallest Purple is freaking out. He eventually traces the override signals to Earth and realizes it must be Zim, and he's the one who also switches the power core of the Resistance ship with the Massives so that they can escape and stop being controlled. This is just the best episode of Invader Zim. It has so much going on, but nothing that's bloated. It's just so good. So many great jokes, so many great character moments, the perfect plot. This is just truly the peak of Invader Zim, and I love it. So yeah, that's my list of the episodes. I hope that whether you agree or disagree, you at least enjoyed the video, but always feel free to tell me down below what you thought. Tell me which episodes you liked that I didn't, or the ones that you didn't like that I did. Tell me why you think I should have liked or disliked an episode more. But until next time, my fellow invaders, conquest is inevitable.